Forks, they can change your life. If you're a fan of The Bear, you know what I'm talking about. Probably. If not, I'm talking about Season 2, Episode 7 of The Bear, where Richie spends a week at a 3-star Michelin restaurant called Ever, and most of the time he's just polishing forks.
They're goddamn forks.
The episode is a turning point for Richie, and I want to look at how that turning point was written, specifically focusing on a sequence of 2 scenes where Richie expresses his frustration at having to polish all these forks, and where Garrett, who's supervising him, kinda gives him a reality check that ends up changing Richie's life. We'll look at those scenes at the line level in the script, and also more broadly at the story and character level. My goal is for us to gain a deeper appreciation for the craft of screenwriting and glean some insights that will help us with our own writing, and it's also just really fun to geek out about this stuff. Let's set up these 2 scenes with a little context for the show and Richie's character. Season 2 is when the restaurant is being transformed from a sandwich shop into a fine dining restaurant, and I think my favorite thing about this season is that it's not just the building that has to be renovated, the characters need to be renovated as well. The staff members all have to grow because working in a sandwich shop is not the same thing as working in a fine dining restaurant that wants Michelin stars. Tina and Ibra go to culinary school, and Marcus is sent to a restaurant in Copenhagen to develop his skills as a pastry chef. But what about Cousin Richie? How does he fit into this whole renovation thing? What's his purpose? He doesn't really have one. His wife left him, he lost his best friend, and now he's losing the sandwich shop, which was kind of the last thing he had going. He's lost, he's resentful, he's scared. So to help Richie kind of find his place and grow, Carmy arranges for him to spend a week as a stage, which is kind of like an intern, at a 3-star restaurant that Carmy used to work at called Ever. And is Richie grateful for this? No, not at all. He's resentful and actually thinks he's being punished, as he says in the episode, for being ancillary, because, again, he doesn't really have a purpose anymore. So leading up to the 2 scenes that we're going to look at, he's just polishing forks and feeling increasingly resentful. The only reason he hasn't quit is he doesn't want Carmy to feel like he's won. He thinks this is a punishment just to be endured, not an opportunity to evolve. All right, let's look at the script. This episode was written by Alex Russell, and we're looking at the blue production draft because this is the draft that I found. It's pretty close to what was aired, but there are some changes that we'll see later. So we're starting out interior Ever Kitchen night. In the episode, they actually changed this to day, and we have Richie polishing again, Garrett too, beside him, silent. Very minimal scene description here, and we only have 2 characters in both these scenes, Richie and Garrett. Garrett we met earlier in the episode. He's the back wait staff. He's not super high up in the restaurant, but he is above Richie because Richie's a stage, so he's the lowest. And Garrett's kind of his supervisor and sort of mentor, quasi-mentor during this episode. It's worth looking at the character description of Garrett when we first met him. It's very minimal. And I love looking at character descriptions. I actually did an entire video, a deep dive on character descriptions, which I'll link to if you want to check that out, where I looked at descriptions in multiple scripts. But with Garrett in this episode, all we get is that he's suited and half Richie's age. One thing I will say about character descriptions is that you only really need to include the relevant info. And here, because Garrett is a supporting character, like, he is great. Garrett's great, but we don't really care about him. We care about Richie. So the only things that are relevant about Garrett are the things that are going to be in relation to Richie. So half Richie's age and suited. Half his age is important because Richie feels old here. He's like polishing and he's 45. We'll get to that a little bit later. But the fact that Garrett is half his age and he's above Richie, like, rankles him. Suited is also really important here. It's kind of getting ahead of myself a little bit. It's a little bit of a spoiler, but at the end of this episode, Richie is going to put on a suit. And when he goes back to the Bear, he's going to be wearing a suit. And that's going to kind of be symbolic of his growth.
Why are you wearing a suit?
Well, I wear suits now.
That's so sick.
But at this point, Garrett's wearing the suit and Richie's not. And Richie kind of looks down on the suit. It's another thing that rankles him because people are taking this so seriously when he's kind of, trying to be above it all. One other thing, though, I want to note about Garrett, which is helpful, I think, for screenwriters to think about, is that Garrett is a stranger. Everyone in The Bear has so much baggage. Everyone is carrying these resentments toward each other. There's all this history weighing people down. And so no one can kind of see each other exactly for who they are, but Garrett is a stranger. He doesn't have any of that. It makes Richie a little more open to what this guy has to say because there is no baggage there. So here at the top of the scene, 2 things to say is that Richie and Garrett each have really strong points of view and they do not see eye to eye. And that is so fantastic for this scene because they're basically starting out in conflict. They see the world they're in differently, and they also want different things. Richie just wants to endure this. That's kind of his goal, but Garrett is trying to operate on a high level. He needs the best from himself and from everyone around him. All right, so let's look at the scene.
I've been doing this forever. Can I wash dishes or something?
So in the script, we have Richie saying, Garrett, yo, chef, I've been doing this forever. Can I wash dishes or something? So basically, we're starting the scene with a want, with an ask. Richie wants something different from what he has, which is great, trying to break this status quo that he's in. And it's really a small thing for him. And this is not motivated because he like really wants to wash dishes. He's just bored. And it seems like a very small ask. But Garrett comes back with,
No, we got the best dishwashers in the world. You're just going to slow them down.
this line from Garrett really operates at multiple levels, and it shows how in great dialogue there's often a disconnect between what is intended, what the speaker intends, and what the recipient hears. So Garrett isn't trying to be mean here. He's sincere. He means this. They have the best dishwashers in the world. Richie is not operating at that level where he's capable of washing dishes at this restaurant. But of course, Richie's going to hear that as an insult. We follow this up with Richie gives the fork a half-hearted wipe and throws it in the polished tray. Garrett picks it back up. That wasn't clean. This is a little different in this episode. Also, Garrett doesn't pick it up. The way that they're set up, Garrett is off to the side of him, and so Richie throws it to the other side. Richie basically here is confirming what Garrett was just saying. If you can't polish a fork, how are you expecting to do anything else in your life? So Garrett here pushes back. But Richie doesn't back down, and this is where it's really important to have the strong POVs that I was talking about, because Garrett and Richie both really believe what they believe. Richie really believes that this is a waste of time. He's being punished. And Garrett really believes that this does matter. So you have a conflict over does this matter? Is any of this important?
I've been doing this for 9 hours. I think I know what's clean.
I'm telling you that's not clean. That was not clean either.
And so they have this little back and forth. And then we get this very important line.
Either please do them properly
Yo, they're goddamn forks.
outside.
And that's the whole thing. Richie's none of this matters. What I'm doing doesn't matter. My place here doesn't matter. This is all BS. And Garrett's response is outside. And I love this response of outside. It's very static. These two guys are just standing side by side, face on. And if you're doing the entire scene like that, it might get a little old, not much is happening. So moving it gets them on their feet. They are facing each other outside. It's some nice energy that's being added to the scene. But I think there's a little bit more to it also besides that. One, there's kind of this idea that Richie is disrespecting the kitchen. He doesn't deserve to be in here. Garrett is offended that this could be said in this kitchen, which is a hallowed space to him, right? This is a temple or a church or something, a cathedral. And Richie is profaning it. So it's get out, you're not allowed to be in here. But it's also helpful in the sense that this gives us an opportunity for a change in perspective. Because if Richie leaves, then when he comes back, he can come back and look at it with new eyes, which is really cool. So then we move on to exterior ever/alley moments later. One thing I'll note here in the scene heading is they're using slashes in between the primary and secondary locations. So ever/alley. Oftentimes you'll see ever space and then a dash and then space alley. But sometimes you'll see it like this. It's the primary location and then the secondary location, which is a smaller thing. So you could have interior hospital dash ER, exterior ever, the name of the restaurant, and then where we are in the restaurant, or outside of the restaurant. And we're moments later, so this is telling us that it's not quite a continuous because we didn't walk outside with them, but it is happening in quick succession from where we were. Garrett and Richie step out. I'll also say that there's very minimal scene description. In other parts of the show, there's gonna be more, but this is a very dialogue heavy sequence. So Garrett has this first line here.
Do you think this is below you or something?
So in the previous scene, Richie has basically challenged Garrett's point of view because Garrett loves this. This is his everything. Richie kind of asks him later on, and Garrett gives a little more where he talks about how he loves taking care of people. Garrett says, I had a boss once that said taking care of people at the highest level can be as valuable as medical caregiving, like in a hospital. That's why we use the same word, hospitality. So for Garrett, this is everything. And Richie's kind of just spit on it when he just says they're just forks, Neither of them at this moment are backing down. They believe what they believe. And that's really important in a scene, is that what your characters believe, and that what they believe, what they're thinking, what they want is motivating their dialogue and their actions.
Man, I think I'm 45 years old polishing forks.
And this just kind of says everything about his character. Everything's kind of broken apart. And being here polishing forks has kind of brought all of that into focus. Is this is where I am. My life has not turned out the way that I want to be. And again, Garrett has a strong POV because he is not here to be a mentor. You could picture this scene in different ways where it's like, someone's taking, Richie aside and being like, hey, let me help you out here. Let me give you some real words of wisdom. But that is not the atmosphere we're in. That is not who Garrett is. He's a good guy. He's not a bad guy. But like, that's not what he cares about. Like, all he really needs, he doesn't need for Richie to become a better person. He just needs for Richie to polish the forks. Like, that's all he wants. Just polish the forks. So when Richie shares this thing about like, I think I'm 45 years old polishing forks, Garrett doesn't like put his hand on his shoulder and be like, hey man, it's going to be okay. He says,
no one is asking you to be here. I don't think anybody remembers your name.
So they're maintaining their points of view very strongly because Richie doesn't back down either. He says, I know how hard it is. In the episode, they say post-COVID to hire people right now. And Garrett says, we don't have that problem. And then we get to one of the biggest differences between this draft and what was actually broadcast. There's an extra couplet here where Richie says, why don't you have that problem? And Garrett says, we have an awful lot of forks. So this was cut. I'm not sure when. It could have been cut in a later draft. It could have been cut on the day, or it could be in the episode and it was just edited out of the episode for time. But I think this is actually a good cut because Garrett here, we have an awful lot of forks, is being glib. And I think it actually turns the corner a little bit to him being kind of mean. Like you could, when he says no one's begging you to be here, or when he's saying we have the best dishwashers in the world, you would slow them down. Those kind of operate on a level where there's just a lot of truth to them. But like, we have an awful lot of forks is just kind of, I don't know, it's a little bit of a snide. It's a little snarky, and it goes against the sincerity, I think, of Garrett's character. So I can't say why they cut this line. It might have just been for time, but I think because of those reasons, it's actually a good trim. So I keep talking about the characters sticking to their POV, and what we're about to read is one of the things that shows why that is so important. Richie says,
Nice try. You think I don't know how hard it is hiring people since COVID?
We don't have that problem.
Garrett's sticking to his guns here. And by sticking to his gun, he kind of gets the first crack in Richie's armor. Like when you have two objects coming up against each other, two characters who are really holding fast to their points of view, kind of one of them has to back down a little bit, like they can't just exist in tension forever. And we see Richie is the one that kind of concedes a little bit.
You really drink this Kool-Aid, huh?
Yeah, I do.
Like, he's not backing down entirely, right? He says, you drink this Kool-Aid. He's still kind of being like thinking this is ridiculous a little bit, but he's actually getting to something real here. It's like the crack that's going to allow this scene to actually matter. And Garrett says, I do, again, sticking to his guns. And then Richie says, how come? And then we get to this long monologue from Garrett. And there are some differences between the monologue in the script and the monologue as broadcast. And I think they're really important because the monologue in the script is very impersonal. It says, because this restaurant opened 12 years ago, voted best in the world, retained 3 stars since the doors opened with a wait list that's long, 5,000 people, outrageously expensive because we set standards that are so outrageous it takes the toll and time from a team of 200 people to keep it in orbit. Because any given moment, one of those 5,000 people might give it a chance to spend a large amount of their time and money here, and they will have outrageous expectations. So we're going to need to have forks that don't have streaks in them. So this version in the script is different from what was broadcast, where Garrett says,
because I love this, Richie. I love this so much, dude.
He talks about seeing the customers' faces, about how stoked they are.
Do you see their faces when they walk in here? How stoked they are to see us and how stoked we have to be to serve them?
This first version is very much like, oh, we're operating at a high level. It's like cutthroat kind of a thing. We're like the best in the world. People are spending a lot of money here, so we have to give them what they want. Like, that's not really something that can be connected to. Like, rich people are spending money, so like, let's give them what they bought. It's just like, why do you care about that? But changing it to love. I love this. The people love this. They are so happy to be here. We are like giving them this gift. This special experience that they're going to keep with them for the rest of their life is way more powerful in my mind than the version on the script. So it's really cool to see how these things can evolve and become better over time. And then the broadcast version also ends with,
I'm sorry, bro, but we need to have some forks without streaks in them. Every day here is the freaking Super Bowl.
Every day is the Super Bowl is something that is way more on like Richie's level, like Richie is going to connect with, then rich people are spending money and we got to like make sure we live up to their expectations. And then we have this line here, Richie is actually listening. And this is kind of checking in on his development over the course of this sequence and this episode, where he really hasn't been able to listen to anyone so far. But this monologue from Garrett has broken through to him. And I think that's fantastic, where it also kind of shows you like the power of people actually speaking from their heart and like having something that's real and that's something that was attuned to whoever they're talking to. Like he said this to Richie in a way that Richie can really understand and connect with. And it's working. But it's only a small change. And this is really important when you're like dealing with character development, especially in television, which is, takes a long time in characters like relapse, but change takes a long time. So this is like a very small thing. He's just listening. He hasn't seen the place differently. He hasn't changed who he is really, but he's just listening. So Richie starting to listen is a small step, but it's really important because it's what opens him up to the next thing.
You don't have to drink the Kool-Aid, Richie. I just need you to respect me. I need you to respect the staff, I need you to respect the diners, and I need you to respect yourself.
Because Richie doesn't respect himself. He thinks he's 45 and polishing forks. He thinks he's a loser. And if you think you're a loser, it's really hard to like make changes in your life because like you're the one who has to make the changes. If you don't believe in yourself, you can't do anything. You need to start somewhere. And Garrett is giving Richie something to start with, a little starting point, and it's respect. Richie says,
I can do respect.
Again, it's speaking the language that Richie is going to respond to, but it's just like giving a kernel for him to grow. It's a shift in perspective that lets him start seeing the world differently. And it's a shift in attitude that's going to let him advance. And this respect thing is the point of the sequence. It's what's going to allow things to move forward. Because there are a few things here on the craft level also that I want to highlight. More specifically, what scenes do and how they work and like what they should be doing. Scenes are the mechanism through which you tell your story. But they also don't exist in isolation, for one. So they're building on what happened. They build on the scenes that happened before, and they allow and inform the scenes that are happening next. So in the scenes before this, Richie is growing more resentful. He's building this like tension inside of himself that needs to go somewhere. It comes to a breaking point, and it does. And Garrett kind of redirects that towards something, towards respect. So what this does here at the end is it allows the next scenes to happen, because what your scenes need to do is launch the next scenes. So Richie was kind of at a standstill before this. He was just frustration and he was just like stuck. And now he's unstuck. And we can have the rest of the episode where he kind of starts to evolve more and get into the spirit of like what this place is. And it allows his character, some more transformation. And you don't get that without this scene. So you need the change over the course of this scene in order to launch the next scenes. It's also showing something else here, which you could call like the third thing, or like maybe A to Z, which is that Richie thought he was living in a binary. Like he had to drink the Kool-Aid or not drink the Kool-Aid and just like be standoffish and resentful like he was. But Garrett is unlocking a third path, a third option, which is that like you don't have to drink the Kool-Aid, but you just have to respect yourself and respect everyone else. And that's what allows the story to move on in kind of a surprising way. And oftentimes in screenwriting, you're looking kind of for that third option, that third way, where it's not all linear, this to this to this. You're finding something else that allows the story to move in an interesting direction. And that's what's happening here. And then finally, we have Lovely come back in, or it's a little different in the episode itself.
Lovely, I'll see you inside.
But this is a perfect metaphor for ending a scene, because Garrett needed one thing to happen, right? He needed sort of Richie to just start taking this seriously so that like the forks aren't going to have streaks in them. He accomplished that goal, and so he's done. And that's the same thing with scenes. Once you accomplish the point of the scene, you're out. And that's what happened. We had the growth we needed. We had the shift we had needed, the change here that's going to like move the story forward, that's going to move the character forward. They don't stick around and like chat a little bit more here. That's for later in the episode. They do open up to each other later. But like for here, this scene had a purpose. And then once the purpose was achieved, you move on. And that's what you do in your own scenes. Once you've achieved the purpose of your scene, you move on. And so we're done. We're back in. Finally, I want to talk a little bit about the aftermath of this sequence.
No more forks?
No more forks.
And there are a couple things I want to highlight. I mentioned Richie is taking small steps. And what that does, it just allows him to start seeing this place, this restaurant, in a new light. He starts paying attention. He starts asking questions, which I think is really cool.
How do they do that if they can't speak? Hey, Chef, what do all these different colors mean? How do you know that?
Know what?
About the people eating.
But despite this growth, it's not a huge thing. Like, he's still who he is. He's still early on in his journey, because later on in the episode, he still thinks that Carmi was trying to punish him. Or even if he doesn't really think it, he's not allowing himself to go beyond that. Like, he came in here kind of with an oppositional attitude of just like, I'm just doing this to like not let Carmi win. And he still has that energy with him because he hasn't healed. He still is who he is. So he does change, but like, he still has a lot of the insecurities, the pain, the things inside of him that are causing him troubles. Like, those are going to stick around for like years to come. So this isn't a panacea. And then the other thing that I want to say is that in the rest of this episode, he kind of becomes like super restaurant boy. Like, he puts on the suit, but it's almost like he's putting on a cape, and he's like kind of suddenly very good at all of these things. And part of it is like, yes, he has untapped potential. And if he believes in himself and tries, he can accomplish great things. And it's like, oh, wow, he's seeing that that's true. Carmi does believe in him. And he's believing himself a little bit, even though like he's not going to admit these things. But it kind of goes to a point that's like a little absurd. Like, there's the scene where Jessica's at her little booth, like doing a whole like air traffic control. And Richie's like,
I think I see the pattern.
and it's like, do you see the pattern? I don't know. And then he's like blind tasting all these sauces, and it's a little much. It's a little fantastical. It is a little far-fetched. But that's not necessarily bad, because our characters aren't real people. Like, that's really important to note, is that everything with characters has to be like heightened, condensed, exaggerated, because like in real life, things take years and like sometimes nothing ever happens. And so when you're telling a story, sometimes you have to do these things where like you show character growth and you go a little over the top to doing it. And the other thing, though, like on a craft level, as sort of a secret, is that if you show a character struggling, then you can, after those struggles, show them succeeding greater than maybe the audience otherwise would have bought. You'll see this in a lot of movies and TV shows where there's like a training montage or something. And if you show someone struggling, like they can't do something multiple times, or like they just don't believe in themselves or something, if you show them struggling, then suddenly they can become the best in the world, and like you'll buy it. So that's just like a little pointer, that if you want your characters to like show some superhuman growth, have them struggle, and then the audience will be okay. It's like the audience will feel that they've earned their growth. All right, that's it for this script study. Thanks for hanging out with me as we looked at these two scenes. I hope you had a good time and maybe learned a few things. If you're feeling inspired to write some scenes of your own, you can start writing your script for free with Arc Studio screenwriting software. Arc Studio brought you this video and is what I use to write my own scripts. You'll find a link to check it out in the description. From all of us at Arc Studio, be kind to yourselves and happy writing.